A farmer and a veteran crouched behind a tractor as armed men surrounded them. 24 hours earlier, he'd hired the mysterious veteran despite his town's warnings. When work began the next morning, black SUVs suddenly appeared, forcing both men to confront a dangerous past and make choices that would change their lives forever. Mike Lawson stood at the edge of his cornfield, watching the sun rise over his 80 acres. At 58, the lines on his face told the story of 30 years working the same land his father had farmed before him. The drought had hit everyone in Oakdee County hard this year, but Mike's farm was suffering more than most. Not because of bad luck, but because of choices he'd made. Unlike other farmers who had switched to genetically modified crops and chemical fertilizers to boost yields, Mike had insisted on doing things the old way, sustainable, natural, the way his father had taught him. "You're putting sentimentality above sense," Harold Jensen had told him just yesterday at the town meeting. Harold owned the largest farm supply store in the county, and had been pushing Mike to modernize for years. "Your father would have adapted with the times." "Pride doesn't pay the mortgage," Mike mused. Maybe Harold was right. 2 more seasons like this one, and Mike might lose everything. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Emily, his daughter, calling from her college dorm 3 hours away. "Dad, I got the financial aid letter. It's not enough, not even close." Mike closed his eyes. Emily was studying agricultural science, the first in their family to go to college. Her dream was to come back and help modernize the farm with sustainable methods that could increase yields without selling out to the big agricultural corporations. "We'll figure something out, honey," Mike said, the words hollow even to his own ears. "Don't worry about it right now. You focus on your studies." After they hung up, Mike stood staring at the fields his grandfather had purchased after returning from World War II. 3 generations of Lawsons had made this land work. He wasn't going to be the one who lost it. That's when he saw the man walking down the rural road that passed by his property, tall, lean, carrying a military-style backpack. Even from a distance, Mike could tell from his gait that the stranger was military, or had been. Mike recognized that distinctive walk. The man stopped at the entrance to Mike's farm, looking at the Help Wanted sign Mike had put up 3 days ago. Nobody in town had shown any interest these days. Young people were leaving Oakdee for the cities, not looking for farm work. As Mike approached, he got a better look at the stranger. Mid-30s, short, brown hair, military posture, but with something heavy weighing on his shoulders. His clothes were clean, but worn. The look in his eyes was what grabbed Mike's attention. Alert, observing everything, but with a weariness that spoke of someone who had seen things nobody should have to see. "Morning," Mike called out. "You looking for work?" The man turned, instinctively assessing Mike before answering. "Yes, sir. The sign says you're hiring." "Farm experience?" "Some. Grew up on one in Nebraska before joining the Marines." That explained the posture. "I'm Mike Lawson. James Cooper. Everyone calls me Coop." They shook hands. Coop's grip was firm, his eyes making direct contact. "Marine Corps?" Mike asked. 12 years, Force Recon." There was no pride in his voice, just a statement of fact. Mike knew enough about the military to recognize what that meant. Force Reconnaissance. Elite Special Operations. This man had seen serious combat. "What brings you to Oakdee?" "Not exactly on the way to anywhere." A slight pause. "Just passing through. Looking for something quiet for a while. Mike nodded, not pushing. Pays not much. Can offer room and board in the farmhand cabin. It's small, but clean. That works for me, sir. Drop the sir. I worked for a living, too. The ghost of a smile crossed Coop's face. An old military joke. Officers got called sir. Enlisted men worked for a living. Army, Coop? Mike asked. But my father was Korea, my brother Vietnam. Mike didn't mention his son, Jason. That wound was still too raw, even after 8 years. The job's yours if you want it, Mike said. Can you start today? Yes. I can start now. Mike showed Coop to the small cabin at the edge of the property. It had been empty since his last farmhand had left 2 years ago for better-paying work in the city. The cabin was basic. One room with a bed, small kitchenette, bathroom. Everything was dusty but intact. I'll get you some clean sheets, Mike said. There's a town meeting tonight. We can go into town. Get you some groceries afterward. Coop set his backpack on the small table. Just one bag for all his possessions. Town meeting? Monthly thing? Boring local politics? Mostly. But it'll give you a chance to meet people. What Mike didn't say was that bringing Coopy to the meeting would head off the inevitable gossip when word got out he'd hired a stranger. Oaked was small enough that new faces always caused a stir. By late afternoon, Mike was impressed. Coop worked without complaint, fixing a section of fence that had been down for months, then helping Mike with an irrigation pump that had been giving him trouble. The man was methodical, efficient, and needed minimal direction. You're good with machines, Mike observed as Coop reassembled the pump. Motor had to be in the field. If your equipment fails, you can't call a mechanic. It was the first personal detail Coop had volunteered all day. When they arrived at the town hall that evening, Mike noticed how Coop surveyed the room, immediately positioning himself against the wall where he could see all entrances. The meeting was typical. Budget discussions, debate about road repairs, complaints about teenagers racing cars on back roads. Afterwards, as people mingled with coffee and cookies, Mike introduced Coop to a few folks. There were mixed reactions. Some were polite, but reserved. Others, like Bill Harmon, who owned the local diner, were openly friendly. Any friend of Mike's is welcome at my place, Bill said, shaking Coop's hand. First coffee's on the house tomorrow. But Mike didn't miss the whispers, the sideways glances. Small towns had long memories, and Oak D had seen its share of drifters who caused trouble. Harold Jensen was the most direct. You hiring now, Mike? He asked, loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. Thought you could barely keep the farm running as it is. Farm's doing fine, Harold, Mike replied evenly. Just needed an extra pair of hands. Harold's eyes narrowed at Coop. Where'd you say you were from, son? Nebraska, originally, Coop answered, his face revealing nothing. And what brings you all the way to Oak D? We're not exactly on the tourist maps. Mike was about to intervene when Sheriff Dave Patterson joined them. Dave had been sheriff for nearly 20 years and had a way of diffusing tensions before they started. Evening, everyone. Mike, good to see you. He turned to Coop. Dave Patterson, I'm the sheriff around here. James Cooper. The sheriff shook Coop's hand, holding it a moment longer than necessary. Military? Marines? Dave nodded. Thought so. My brother was Marines, served in Desert Storm. Something unspoken passed between them. Mike had the distinct impression Dave was making his own assessment of Coop and letting Coop know he was being assessed. "Stop by the station tomorrow," Dave said casually. "We should chat." "We will," Coop replied. As they were leaving, elderly Mrs. Winters, who had taught 3 generations of Oak children before retiring, caught Mike's arm. "Be careful, Mike," she whispered. "That young man has seen things, done things. I can tell." "Haven't we all, Mrs. Winters?" Mike replied, gently. She shook her head. "Not like him? There's a darkness there." Sheriff Dave appeared at Mike's side, having overheard the exchange. "Mike, got a minute?" They stepped outside, away from the crowd. "You remember what happened with that drifter back in '98? Dave asked quietly. Mike nodded. How could anyone forget? A stranger passing through town, taken in by the Millers to work their orchard. 3 weeks later, their barn burned down, and valuables went missing. The stranger disappeared the same night. "I'm not saying your guy is anything like that," Dave continued, "but folks around here have long memories. After what happened to the Millers, then that incident with the Carson farm a few years back." He let the words hang. "Coop's not like that," Mike said, more confidently than he felt. "He served our country. So did plenty of guys who came back different than when they left." Dave's expression softened. "Just be smart, Mike. Keep your eyes open." Back inside, Mike noticed several townspeople watching Coop warily. Harold Jensen had gathered a small circle and was speaking in hushed tones, occasionally glancing in Coop's direction. When they saw Mike looking, they quickly dispersed. The drive back to the farm was quiet. Mike didn't push for conversation, and Coop seemed content with silence. But as they turned onto the gravel road leading to the farm, Coop spoke. "They don't want me here, some don't. Others are just cautious. Small town. I can find work somewhere else." Mike shook his head. "If I worried about what everyone in town thought, I'd never get out of bed in the morning." He paused. "Unless you're planning to cause trouble, in which case I should know now." "No, sir. No trouble. Just looking for quiet work." Mike nodded. "Then we'll be fine." But as he pulled up to the farmhouse, Mike couldn't help wondering if he was making a mistake. He knew nothing about this man except that he was ex-military and carried himself like someone who had seen the darkest parts of the world. What Mike didn't know was that by this time tomorrow, his decision to hire James Cooper would either be the biggest mistake of his life or the thing that saved everything he cared about. Dawn broke with the sound of hammering. Mike woke, momentarily confused, then remembered. Coop must already be at work. He dressed quickly and went outside to find Coop repairing the steps to the old grain silo. "Been up long?" "Couple hours," Coop replied, not pausing in his work. "Hope you don't mind. I saw this needed fixing." Mind? No. Mike was impressed. The steps had been a safety hazard for months. "Coffee's on in the house when you're ready for a break." Over breakfast, Mike laid out the day's tasks, then mentioned, "I need to go into town for supplies. You should stop by the sheriff's office like he asked." Coop nodded. They drove in separately, Mike in his truck, Coop in the battered Honda Civic he'd parked down the road the previous day. In town, they split up, agreeing to meet at Bill's diner afterward. Mike was loading feed into his truck when Harold Jensen approached. "You're making a mistake, Mike," Harold said without preamble. "Hello to you too, Harold." "I'm serious. Nobody knows anything about this guy." "Where's he been? What's he done? Did you even check references? Mike secured the last bag of feed. He's a veteran who needs work. That's enough for me. Is it? Did you ask what kind of discharge he got? There are veterans, and then there are veterans, if you know what I mean. Mike felt his patience wearing thin. What I know, Harold, is that my farm is my business. Your farm is one bad season from foreclosure, and we both know it, Harold said, lowering his voice. Taking in strays isn't a smart move, Mike. What Harold didn't need to spell out hung in the air between them. Everyone knew the town had cut Mike slack because of the Lawson name. 3 generations of respect bought patience from creditors, including Harold's family, who owned shares in the local bank. I'll keep that in mind, Mike said, getting into his truck. As he drove away, Mike glanced in his rearview mirror and saw Harold already on his phone. By noon, the entire town would be talking. At the diner, Coop was already seated in a booth back to the wall, coffee in hand. He looked tense. Everything okay with the sheriff? Mike asked, sliding into the booth. Fine. Mike waited, but Coop didn't elaborate. Bill came over with coffee for Mike and refilled Coop's cup. How's our resident hero doing today? Bill asked cheerfully. Coop looked uncomfortable with the label. Just a Marine, sir. Nothing heroic about it. My son's in the Army, Bill said. Iraq, 2 tours. Afghanistan, 1. I know what you boys go through over there. Heroic in my book. After Bill left, Mike studied Coop's expression. There was something there. Pain, maybe regret, that flickered across his face when Bill mentioned heroism. You don't have to talk about it, Mike said. But if you ever want to, I'm a good listener. Coop looked up from his coffee. Why'd you hire me, Mr. Lawson? Really? You don't know me. Town clearly has reservations. Mike considered his answer. 'Cause 25 years ago I needed a chance and someone gave it to me. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to look past assumptions. The corner of Coop's mouth twitched, almost a smile. And what assumptions should people be looking past with me? That's for you to say, not me. Their food arrived, ending the conversation. As they ate, Mike noticed a black SUV with tinted windows drive slowly past the diner. Government plates. Unusual ride for around here, Mike commented. Coop glanced up, saw the vehicle, and his body language changed instantly. Shoulders tense, eyes focused, hand instinctively moving toward his hip where a weapon might once have been. We should go, Coop said, his voice suddenly flat. Everything okay? Just remembered something I need to do back at the farm. Coop was already pulling cash from his wallet for the bill. As they left, Mike spotted a second black SUV parked across the street. 2 men in suits stood beside it, watching the diner. When they saw Coop, one spoke into his wrist, a communication device of some kind. They drove back separately, Coop's Honda staying right on Mike's bumper the whole way, as if he was being shadowed. In his rearview mirror, Mike could see Coop constantly checking his own mirrors. Whatever was happening, it wasn't good, and it had followed Coop to Oaked. As they turned onto the long driveway to the farm, Mike saw them. 3 black SUVs parked in front of his farmhouse. At least 6 men in dark suits were positioning themselves around the property. Not local law enforcement. These men moved with military precision. Coop's car suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside Mike's truck, and he gestured frantically for Mike to stop. Both vehicles halted 100 yards from the house, hidden by a stand of trees. "Stay here," Coop ordered, His entire demeanor was transformed. Gone was the quiet farmhand. This was a soldier preparing for combat. "Those are government plates," Mike said. "FBI, CIA, not exactly." Coop's eyes were scanning the tree line, the fields, calculating something. "Mr. Lawson, Mike, I'm sorry, this is my problem, not yours." "It's on my farm, so it's my problem, too." Mike's voice was firm. "What's going on, Coop?" For a moment, it seemed Coop wouldn't answer. Then he sighed. "Meridian Security, private military contractor?" Mike watched Coop's expression darken as he continued scanning the property. "They're looking for me because I wouldn't do what they asked. And because I kept proof of what they've been doing." Coop's jaw tightened. "Assassinations, illegal weapons sales, things no American company should be doing, things I wouldn't be part of." The pieces were falling into place for Mike. "So you're not running from the law, you're running from them." Laws are complicated in this situation. Meridian has government contracts, high-level connections. Coop looked at Mike directly. "I didn't mean to bring this to your door. I'll handle it." "By yourself? Against all of them?" Mike gestured toward the farmhouse where more men had appeared. "That's suicide." "I've handled worse odds." There was no bravado in Coop's voice, just calm assessment. Mike made a decision. "There's another way to the house. Through the back fields. We can circle around, come in through the old storm cellar." Coop shook his head. "This isn't your fight." "It's my farm." "They're trespassing." Mike's tone left no room for argument. "Now, are we going to sit here talking, or are we going to do something about those men on my property?" For the first time since they'd met, Coop smiled. A genuine smile that transformed his face. "Yes, sir." They abandoned the vehicles and moved through the cornfields, using the tall stalks as cover. Mike led them along irrigation ditches, staying low, avoiding the sight lines of the men surrounding his house. "They've got the house surrounded," Coop whispered as they crouched behind the tool shed. "Looking for something? Me." Coop's expression was grim, and then he pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "Everything Meridian doesn't want the world to know. Operations, clients, offshore, accounts. Can't you just give it to the FBI or the press?" "Tried that." The haunted look in Coop's eyes told Mike there was more to the story. "First journalist contacted was found dead 2 days later." "Robbery gone wrong," they said. Coop's voice went flat. "Meridian has people everywhere." Mike took this in, watching as Coop continued assessing their situation. "I count 8 men, probably more inside the house." Mike felt a chill. Armed men were searching his home, the place where he'd raised his children, where generations of Lawsons had lived and died. "What's the plan?" Mike asked. "I leave. Draw them away from your farm. It's me they want." Mike shook his head. "They've already seen my truck. They know I'm connected to you. Running won't solve anything." Before Coop could respond, Mike's phone rang. Harold Jensen. Mike silenced it. "We need help," Mike said. "Local help." He dialed a number. "Dave, it's Mike Lawson. I've got a situation at my farm. Armed men in suits. Not local. Yes, that's right. No, I'm not on the property. Watching from the tree line." "Okay, thanks." He hung up. "Sheriff's on his way with deputies." Coop looked skeptical. "Sheriff doesn't stand a chance against these guys." "Dave serves special forces. He knows what he's doing." Mike's phone buzzed with a text. "Dave says stay put. 10 minutes. They waited, watching as the men methodically searched the property, checking out buildings, looking through windows. One man found Coop's backpack in the cabin and brought it to what appeared to be the leader. A tall man with gray hair wearing an expensive suit, despite the rural setting. "That's Victor Crane," Coop whispered. "Head of operations for Meridian. If he's here personally, they're desperate." Mike's phone buzzed again. Dave was in position with 4 deputies. County SWAT was on standby, and he'd made calls to state police. "Tell him we're coming in from the west side," Coop said, "and that these men are armed and dangerous." Mike relayed the message, then followed Coop as they circled to approach from the opposite direction of where the sheriff would enter. "We're the distraction," Coop explained. "Get their attention while Dave comes in from behind." Mike nodded, adrenaline flooding his system. It had been decades since he'd faced anything more dangerous than a broken tractor. But some instincts never faded. They reached the edge of the clearing. From here, they could see 3 men near the farmhouse porch, including Crane. "Ready?" Coop asked. "As I'll ever be." Before they could move, they heard vehicles approaching fast, but not from the direction they expected. 3 more black SUVs came roaring up the driveway, skidding to stops near the others. But these were different. The men who emerged weren't in suits. They wore tactical gear, moved with military precision, and each carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a combat veteran. "The hell?" Mike whispered. Coop stared in disbelief. "Alpha Team," he breathed. "My unit." Mike watched as the new arrivals took defensive positions, weapons ready but controlled. Their movements were synchronized, practiced. These men had fought together before. The leader of the new group, a powerfully built black man with captain's bars on his tactical vest, approached the gray-haired man in the expensive suit. Even from a distance, the tension was visible in every line of their bodies. "That's Victor Crane," Coop whispered. "Head of operations for Meridian. If he's here personally, they're desperate." Captain Reynolds and Crane stood face to face, neither backing down. Reynolds's voice carried across the yard, clear and commanding. "This operation is over, Crane. Stand down. Your men, this is a Meridian operation," Crane replied, equally forceful. "You have no authority here. I've got orders saying different." Reynolds held up a folder, signed by the director himself. Crane's posture changed, a barely perceptible stiffening. "Impossible. The flash drive Cooper has... We've got the backup. Every committee chairperson in Congress has the files as of this morning." Reynolds took a step closer. "Your protection just evaporated." Mike looked at Coop, who seemed as shocked as he was. "Captain Reynolds, was my commanding officer," Coop explained quietly. "After I went AWOL with the evidence, I thought I was alone. I had no idea they were, He shook his head. "I should have trusted them." "Here now," Mike said. "That's what matters." The standoff was reaching a critical point. Crane's men had their hands near weapons. Reynolds's team was clearly prepared for resistance. "We should get out there," Coop said suddenly, "before this turns into a firefight on your property." Before Mike could respond, sheriff's vehicles appeared from the main road, lights flashing. Dave Patterson stepped out, shotgun in hand, deputies behind him. "Alpha Team, tipped off the sheriff," Coop realized. "Smart. Local jurisdiction gives them legal cover." Sheriff Dave's voice boomed across the property. "This is private property. Unless someone shows me a warrant in the next 30 seconds. You're all trespassing! The arrival of local law enforcement created the opening Coop needed. He stepped out from their hiding place, hands raised. "I'm here, Crane," he called out. "This ends now!" All eyes turned to Coop. Mike stood beside him, refusing to let him face this alone. What happened next unfolded with military precision. Reynolds's team moved between Coop and Crane's men. Sheriff Patterson and his deputies created an outer perimeter, cutting off any escape route. Reynolds approached Coop and, to everyone's surprise, saluted him. "Sorry it took so long, Lieutenant. Had to make sure we had all our ducks in a row." "What changed?" Coop asked. "Your evidence reached the right people. Joint Chiefs got involved." Reynolds smiled grimly. "Turns out even Meridian's friends in high places have bosses." Crane was being handcuffed by Reynolds's men as federal agents began arriving, clearly called in advance by Alpha Team. His security personnel, outmanned and outmaneuvered, surrendered without resistance. As the situation diffused, curious townspeople began to gather, drawn by the convoy of law enforcement vehicles. Among them was Harold Jensen, who approached Mike with wide eyes. "Mike, what in God's name is happening on your farm?" For once, Harold had no criticisms, only amazement, as he watched what appeared to be a major federal operation unfolding in their small community. By evening, the black SUVs were gone, replaced by news vans. The story was breaking nationally. A private military contractor caught running unauthorized operations, a whistleblower who had risked everything to expose them, and the elite military team that had backed him up when it mattered most. Mike sat on his porch with Coop, or Lieutenant James Cooper as the news was calling him, watching the sun set over fields that had suddenly become the center of a national story. "What happens now?" Mike asked. "Congressional hearings, trials. A lot of powerful people are going to face consequences." Coop looked tired, but relieved. "For me, probably months of testimony and debriefings. And after that..." Coop looked out at the fields, golden in the evening light. "I don't know. Never thought I'd get this far, to be honest." Mike nodded toward the farm. "There's always work here if you want it once all this dies down." "Why would you still want me around? I brought all this to your doorstep." Mike looked out at the land his family had farmed for generations. "You did the right thing when it would have been easier not to," he smiled. "Besides, you fixed that irrigation pump in 20 minutes. That's rare these days." Coop laughed, a sound Mike hadn't heard from him before. "I'll think about it." The next morning, most of the news vans had departed. Captain Reynolds and his team had moved to a nearby military base where the investigation was continuing. Coop would be joining them later that day. As Mike walked Coop to his car, now packed with his few belongings, the rest of Alpha Team waited to escort him. "Thank you," Coop said, extending his hand, "for taking a chance on me when nobody else would." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Mike replied, shaking his hand. "One person willing to look past assumptions." As Coop drove away with his team, Mike turned to find a small crowd of townspeople had gathered at his farm gate. Harold Jensen was at the front looking somewhat chastened. "Mike," he began awkwardly, "the town council met this morning. We'd like to offer some assistance with your irrigation system upgrade. Community fund." Mike raised an eyebrow. "That's right. Seems the least we can do," Harold continued, "for the man who helped a national hero." "He wasn't a hero because of what happened yesterday," Mike said. "He was a hero when nobody was watching, when doing the right thing meant giving up everything." Harold nodded, understanding slowly dawning. The farm could use the help, Mike acknowledged. But there's something else we'd need to discuss. Emily's college fund? 6 months later, Mike's farm had become something of a local landmark. Tourists occasionally drove by, hoping to see where the Meridian standoff had happened. The town had rallied behind Mike, with a community fund helping to modernize his irrigation system while maintaining his commitment to sustainable farming. Emily had secured a scholarship created by the town council specifically for agricultural studies. She was thriving in college, calling home with new ideas for the farm nearly every week. And the small cabin at the edge of the property had a new occupant. Lieutenant James Cooper, now officially discharged from the Marines with honors, had returned to Oak Ridge after completing his testimony. The congressional hearings had exposed corruption that reached the highest levels of government and private industry. On a cool autumn evening, Mike and Coop sat on the porch, watching the harvest moon rise over fields that had yielded their best crop in years. "Never thought I'd end up a farmer," Coop said, sipping coffee. "Never thought I'd hire a national whistleblower," Mike replied with a smile. "Life takes unexpected turns." "That it does." Coop was silent for a moment. "You know, when I went on the run with that flash drive, I thought I was alone. Thought everybody I'd served with had either turned or wouldn't risk their careers to stand with me. And you were wrong. Completely." Captain Reynolds had been building a case for months, gathering his own evidence. He just needed mine to complete the picture. Coop shook his head. "All that time running, thinking I was alone. And I had allies I never knew about." Mike nodded. "That's usually how it works. The people who stand with you in the hard times aren't always the ones you expect." From the road came the sound of vehicles approaching. Emily was home for the weekend, bringing some of her college friends to help with the Harvest Festival preparations. The town had decided to hold it at the Lawson farm this year. The first time in decades it hadn't been on the Old Town Square. "You gave me a chance when you had every reason not to," Coop said quietly. "Changed everything." "No," Mike corrected him. "You changed everything when you decided to do what was right, no matter the cost." He looked at the farmland stretching out before them, now thriving. "I just gave you a place to stand." As Emily's car pulled up, followed by several others filled with young people eager to help with the festival, Mike and Coop rose to greet them. The farmyard would soon be filled with laughter and energy, a far cry from the armed standoff that had taken place there months before. "You know what the real irony is?" Mike said as they walked toward the cars. "This farm was failing. One more bad season, and I might have lost it all. Now," he gestured to the thriving fields, the repaired buildings, the new irrigation system. "Now it's going to be here for another generation. Strange how things work out." "Not strange," Mike said. "Just a reminder that doing the right thing matters, even when it seems like the world is against you, even when you can't see how it's going to end." As the young people piled out of their cars, bringing with them the energy and optimism of a new generation, Mike thought about the lesson that had played out on his farm. Sometimes the most important choice was the simplest one, to give someone a chance when others wouldn't, to stand by your principles when it would be easier to compromise, to believe that doing the right thing mattered even when you couldn't see how the story would end.